Tyler, you and I have spent the better part of close to 15 years at this point following the energy industry, traditional oil and gas, the entire value chain of companies that do all sorts of different things there, the renewable energy industry from residential solar all the way through utility scale, companies that manufacture the goods, the companies that do the installation, everything in that value chain as well, wind, solar, hydrogen, all of the things. We've spent a lot of time talking about all of the things, and we've entered into a new era right now with the Trump administration now having taken over and President Trump signing a lot of executive orders his first day in office. And one in specific, I'm going to share it on the screen, Unleashing America Energy, that has a lot of things in it that are kind of upending a lot of things in renewable energy right now and really reprioritizing towards traditional oil and gas. And investors need to know what's going on. Is this Armageddon for the renewable energy industry, or is this really maybe an opportunity in disguise? This is too big for one video. So we're going to do two videos. This one, we'll talk about the wind sector. We'll do another one about solar. You ready to dig in?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here with, we're used to talking a lot, but at least this time we'll carve it up a little bit.
Yeah, we are. So investors who are looking for a quick video with hot tips, it's probably not the video for you, but if you want to understand the nuance of what's going on, this is a good opportunity to do it. I encourage you to stay with us here. I'm Jason Hall. This is Investing Unscripted. This video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. If you're looking for even more great stock ideas than what we're going to talk about on this video, you should go to our special link. Go to fool.com/unscripted. Again, fool.com/unscripted. Go to that link and you can get access to The Motley Fool's 10 best stocks to buy right now. Okay, Tyler, let's talk about exactly what's happened since President Trump was sworn in and began signing some executive orders. And then we can get into the implications of some of the companies that are going to be affected.
Yeah, it's been a pretty busy week, I guess you could say, for renewable energy, specifically wind. I think the big theme that will probably go through these couple of videos talking about renewable energy here is that wind is the one that's taking it on the chin a little bit more than anybody else right now, at least in the way that it is currently structured. The two big things that are a component of these executive actions, not just the one that you spoke of specifically, but also some of the other things that are being undone from the previous administration. The ones that I want to focus on here the most when it comes to wind is that there's going to be a temporary halt on all offshore wind leases on federal waters, and then pausing the issuance of approvals, permits, and loans for both onshore and offshore wind projects. Again, two components of it. Offshore wind, I think is kind of the big one to talk about here to start, because offshore wind has kind of been we'll call it the promising future thing that hasn't quite materialized yet relative to everything else in the wind industry. It holds a lot of promise in terms of energy potential, because typically offshore wind tends to be stronger, a little bit more consistent than what we see onshore. So there's that. The problem is it's just challenging to do. I know that anybody who is a frequent listener to Bloomberg's Odd Lots podcast, they've done a lot on offshore wind as to why it's been challenging, from permitting, from having like Jones Act compliant ships to shuttle things to and from wind installations. It's been a much harder thing than we would have probably thought than originally anticipated. So when it comes to actual impact of how much is this going to impact my utility bill? Probably not much, at least from the federal offshore stuff, because it's not really a material part of the current power infrastructure in the United States. However, there are a lot of companies that have been kind of betting on wind to be a major growth outlet for them, especially major wind turbine manufacturers.
I'm going to share on the screen right now a list of some of the bigger players in this space. We see the outlier here is GE Vernova, which was the GE spinoff earlier this spring. It's a diversified energy business across natural gas turbines for utility scale power production, wind turbines, mostly onshore. They have some joint venture work that they're doing offshore, but it's again across the entire space. They have some things tied to nuclear as well that they do. So it's a diversified business. You get into these others. Vestas, again, largely onshore, but they have a growing offshore business. But this is a pure play. It's a Danish company that manufactures wind turbines, and they have a large service business as well. You have Ørsted, which is Danish as well, I believe, largely offshore, right? That's a big portion of their business. And then TPI Composites, which frankly, they've been kind of in a mess for a couple of years because the wind subsector has been in a bit of a downturn because of rising interest rates and other factors that have put pressure on that that utility scale, large project sort of business. But TPI Composites specifically, their business is manufacturing the blades for these turbines as a contract manufacturer for all of the largest players, because the blades are so giant, you have to manufacture them geographically close to where the turbines are being deployed. And their business is really being upended by this right now.
Yeah, and this has kind of been like you said, this has been a trend that's been going on for a couple of years now. This isn't just something that's happened immediately with the enactment of these reversal policies. Like you said, higher interest rates has probably actually been a bigger impact for wind than almost anything else over the past 5 years, simply because wind development takes that much longer. If you relative to like a solar installation, especially like, I don't know, residential solar, to get the major perspective, an offshore wind farm can take a year to maybe, we measure it in years, maybe even a decade to build one of these out, versus like, I don't know, a residential solar can be done by a good contractor in a weekend, right? So the amount of project financing that you have to have available to do these sort of things has been a major factor here. Now, what this means for these in the future is hard to tell. Like you said, offshore American wind has not, like I said, has not been very big. It's been a much larger component of European energy. So it's not like these companies have nowhere to go, because they're global companies that are selling a global product. But as far
The one
as
exception, of course, being TPI Composites, it's not economic to manufacture blades in Mexico and send them to Europe, for example.
Yeah.
So beyond that, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so there's outlets here. And then on the onshore side is where I think there's a little bit more of an impact, because there are a lot of utilities that have been using wind as a major component of their growth or replacement strategies in recent years, especially if you look across, I would say, the Midwest, particularly Mid-American Energy, the utility that Berkshire Hathaway owns, has
formerly Mid-American Energy. Now it's called Berkshire Hathaway Energy.
Yes.
But they've consolidated a lot all over the Midwest, which is, they call it the Saudi Arabia of wind, I believe is what they call it, that middle corridor of the United States that is certainly going to be affected by this. I promise you, there are lots of projects that have now been tabled because they were targeted to be built on federal lands.
Yeah, and it's not even I don't even know if the onshore project part has to do with federal lands either. This is just permitting and approval for loans. So if there was a utility that was using, I don't know, a Department of Energy loan for wind development, then that's going to be put on pause too. And so it may not necessarily put an end to these projects. Certainly anything that is already approved and like the money has gone out the door and the permits have already been stamped, those things are going to get built out. I don't know if this is going to affect things like actual construction timelines in the next 6 months, but you could certainly see the kind of stuff earlier on in the development pipeline might start to get tabled with a lot of uncertainty as to whether or not we're going to get approval for it. This is a pause. This is not like we are ripping all of these up. That's never going to happen again. It's just a significant pause on it. What that means is kind of uncertain at this point, but it certainly will impact the decisions that they make going forward, because if I'm a developer and it takes me several years to get one of these things online, let's say 5 years, and it spans multiple presidential administrations, how much risk am I willing to take to push one of these sort of projects forward with the possibility that, I don't know, maybe, to use a sports analogy, what if I'm like on the far 5-yard line? I've really pushed this thing all the way through and then it gets snatched away from me at the last minute. It's a possibility.
Companies need predictability, right? And managements are going to build their plans based around things that they're going to know they're going to be able to accomplish, not things that they're operating in a situation of uncertainty around the cost, around accessibility of land and other things that they're going to need.
We kind of went in with the Armageddon aspect. I don't know if it's Armageddon. I think on a pure economic standpoint, if these projects make sense, businesses will find a way to get them done. Maybe some of them that were a little bit more marginal, maybe a little bit more dependent on tax credits to actually make happen. Those things probably much less likely. So Armageddon, no, but certainly a much more significant headwind to this industry than what we have seen in the previous administration and the first Trump administration.
Did you really just say headwind, Tyler?
Come on, dude. We're both dads now. We're allowed to make bad puns.
Fair. All right. I want to talk a little bit about again, this isn't a partisan or political thing, but I think this is a really important part of the story that really matters over the long term. Right now, we have a lot of uncertainty that's certainly going to affect decisions that companies are going to be making in the near term as they're navigating this environment. But the US Constitution is pretty clear about this separation of powers between the administration and between Congress, and Congress controls the purse strings. Congress actually allocates the funds, right? They say this money is going towards this. And right now, one of the things that's been paused is funding for Inflation Reduction Act related allocations for 90 days. So that's the sort of thing that probably for 90 days the administration can get away with. I do think if the administration oversteps its constitutionally granted authority around the power of the purse versus its role in administering those funds and operating the different agencies, then we're going to see lawsuits that are going to happen. The other way that things could go too is changes of the law, right? And I know this is part of the playbook that administrations use, and it's not going to be different with the Trump administration because we do have a Republican control of both the House and the Senate, but it's pretty narrow. So it seems unlikely that at least during this term of Congress, that there's enough of a majority to maybe overturn the IRA. So I think part of the thesis for investing in solar and wind both, Tyler, is the economics are at least partly driven still by those federal incentives, right? Not just for the equipment, but also there's a production credit as well. So right now, those things are still the law of the land, but there's a bigger story too. You mentioned the international opportunity, and we've seen a lot of things happen that continue to drive the economics more favorably towards renewables like wind. We continue to see the rollout of more energy storage, and those technologies continue to drive down costs as it scales up. So I think my take right now, we're in a period of uncertainty where I think broadly investors should probably be patient and watching. I think this is a good time to learn, not necessarily a time to be acting, because again, we're still in the middle of, broadly speaking, a downturn for wind in most of the world. It's kind of a weak period right now because interest rates have gone up. I do think there will be opportunities to invest, but I don't think investors have to rush out to buy anything. You look at a company like TPI Composites, they've made some steps forward, but their company still has a lot of work to do. I think that's a company investors should probably be avoiding right now. But broadly, if you have exposure to some of these companies, I don't think this is a time to be rushing out to sell. I don't necessarily know that it's a time to buy right now. I think we should let things play out a little bit more and maybe then make some decisions.
The large takeaway when it comes to this and most of the things that we talk about, like 80% of the time, probably the best advice is to do nothing. It's not exactly the most, actionable thing people want to hear. It's really do nothing, not overreact, not be irrational, and do a little bit more digging before making what could be a relatively rash decision when you read a headline like we've seen with these IRA pauses and go, oh my goodness, I need to sell everything.
I agree. Last thing, if you're looking for more insights on what's going on the solar side, look on our channel and you'll see the one that we did for solar as well. Go check that out. Give us your thoughts in the comments as well. I'd love to hear from you. That's it for now. We'll see you next time.